remnants of the kitchen stool crashed to the floor, but not a dent was made on the walls. You panted through the strain you felt in your shoulders after attempting to smash your way out from the walls when you had made every other attempt to escape somehow. You've tried the lock with a butter knife being the closest thing you could find, but knew it was a hopeless cause. He had been methodical when he built these apartment blocks. He was smart. You gave him that, leaving his playthings in windowless apartments. Every day that passed was built on silence except for the television every now and then, when you decided to watch what little entertainment was available. There were no news broadcasts, no commercials, just endless reruns of All Might's adventures. Ironic. You remembered how much he idolized the once former number one. Aside from the drone of the television, it was a mundane living experience. Wake up, clean up, breakfast. Hours of mindless activities, ranging from whichever and whatever was left at the door every morning. Dinner, then bed. You wondered how every other resident must be going through this, day in, day out. The saddest thought of them having lost their minds, broken and defeated. It was close to dinner when you've spent the last hour trying to break the wall, as futile as it seemed. You figured it was time to raid the fridge for whatever provisions were left for you to start. Opening the fridge, you found it still stocked with food. Lately, you hadn't been eating, but you were more so putting all your energy in finding ways to escape this apartment. Ever since Monoma's visit on your supposed first day here, you had no contact with anyone, except for the television. A few crossword and Sudoku puzzles helped keep your mind sharp, but eventually they too were becoming a bore. You learned early that you had no way of communicating to the outside world. Your phone was not on your person at all. The only thing you had to keep you guessing about the days was a notch behind the television. One for every day that passed. You recalled notching your 7th day. A week in solitude. You picked out a microwavable meal, something easy for you to quickly heat and eat. Your mind was elsewhere, wondering what was going on in the world, let alone the city. A week was a long time for anything to transpire. The bruise on your cheek was still present, fading slowly over time, but you had to give Monoma credit for his strength despite his attitude. Heating your meal and opening its contents, you sat by the kitchen island bench and began to slowly partake in the stale meal. It would be soon that you would head to bed, staring at the bare ceiling until the next day for you to try again with the walls. By now, it was the only thing that kept you sane. The sound of the lock clicked, catching your eye and your ear. You stopped momentarily by the kitchen before you quickly ran for the door, hoping to take a chance to run out as fast as your legs could carry. Until the door swung open in front of you, coming face to face with him, almost crashing into his chest before he reached out and grabbed you, his chuckle reverberating against you in his hold.
Whoa, did you miss me?
Cooed Midoriya while he slowly walked into the apartment with you in his arms.
I'm so happy to see that.
You felt his grip tighten around your waist while he leaned his head towards yours, only for you to recoil away from him as he did. Your hands pressed against his chest while you did so, feeling his grip tenderly take you.
I'm sorry I haven't come by to visit. Business called me away for a bit,
he continued.
But I made it just in time for dinner.
He eyed the half-eaten meal you've left on the bench before his warm smile widened.
Sorry, I already ate.
You replied, hoping that may deter him for a bit.
Maybe another time?
Oh, Poppet. That's not dinner.
He cooed again before he released his grip on you.
I thought to make up for my lack of company, I should take you somewhere special. After all, you look to be going a little stir-crazy.
You noticed the look in his eye when he looked past you, spotting the broken stool on the floor in pieces.
It's not a long walk, but I think you'll like it there.
You imagined it may be somewhere close by to these apartments that he was speaking of. However, after your close attention and detail to Midoriya's activities, it was highly unlikely. The last thing that crossed your mind was being taken to wherever he stayed. His domain. Somewhere where he had complete control over you whenever he pleased. And that thought terrified you. With a quick flick of his wrist, Midoriya injected something into your shoulder with a hard strike of his fist, feeling the pinch from whatever needle it was that penetrated your skin. You hissed in pain from the sudden shock, but soon it disappeared as quickly as it came. The grin on Midoriya's face widened, eerily cheerful after the fact.
Oops. Sorry. Just a love bite.
He reassured.
Allow me.
As soon as he had administered whatever drug he injected you with, he held you in his embrace and kissed the spot on your shoulder, his warmth engulfing you. A wave of emotions hit you hard. Comfort, confusion, and a slight hint of distaste all at once. Your history with Midoriya back at UA didn't help the scenario. You wanted him to come back, to return to the kind soul he once was. And despite his actions, there were some that were mere remnants and shadows of what he was. The click of your wrists took you by surprise after Midoriya had kissed your shoulders, finding your wrists now bound in handcuffs. Midoriya pulled away, holding onto a chain that connected with said cuffs, shrugging his shoulders nonchalantly.
Now we're ready to go,
he stated with a smile.
I'm not a pet,
you bluntly remarked, before he tugged at the chain, pulling you closer to him.
No, you're my puppet, and I can't have you running away from me again.
With another tug, he pulled you towards the front door of your room, allowing you to take a step outside onto the hallway that stretched across the length of this particular block. After days in a windowless apartment, the evening light hit your eyes with a sting. It wasn't bright daylight, but it had been so long since you've seen any. Midoriya led you through the apartment blocks, spotting the long wall of locked doors and hearing not a peep from any of the rooms. His soundproof walls were impressive, but the thought crossed your mind on what kinds of noises would his neighbors be screaming and yelling to escape his hold. You figured that injection earlier was to suppress your quirk, realizing you weren't able to focus on anything on the streets outside to recognize where you were. At the very least, you estimated how long it will last. A couple of days, give or take. Your shoulders slumped while you followed Midoriya's footsteps, watching the square of his back fitted with a crisp suit. captured by the man you were charged to capture yourself.
You're awfully quiet,
spoke Midoriya while he continued to lead you.
Is there something on your mind?
Nothing important.
You replied, your eyes still on the square of his back.
Just wondering where you're taking me.
You'll be surprised. I'm sure of it.
He replied with confidence.
I never bring anyone out for this.
He had always said this before. He never did anything for anybody, except for you. Special treatment and all, but his obsession with you was unnerving. In the back of your mind, you felt that there must be something there to bring him back. It was the only hope you held on to. If you couldn't escape, you were fervent that you had to change things from the inside, starting from the top. Eventually, Midoriya led you into an elevator, taking you to the topmost floor after eyeing his selection of the numbers available. He started to hold on to you while you tried to tolerate his touch. He couldn't keep his hands away from you while he made every opportunity to embrace you. So far, he had done nothing to physically hurt you like he did upon your first meeting, but you also thought physical resistance would only flare up his displeasure in your reactions. The elevator ride took longer than you imagined, wondering how many floors this block must really have before the doors opened. The evening sunlight burned through the open doors, while Midoriya's head leaned against your shoulder from behind, his breath washing against your ear before he whispered,
Surprise, Poppet.
There, sitting before you, was a small table complete with a cooked meal to share between two seats. However, what surprised you the most was the plant life that surrounded the table. The large paned windows that curved upwards towards the sky refracted the sunlight that poured inside. It was a large greenhouse, filled with shrubbery and medium-sized trees that decorated the walls. It was the perfect getaway, hiding in plain sight. Midoriya led you towards the table, offering you a seat while he changed your restraints to some visible calipers on the ground beside your chair. Still trapped, but you were able to reach for the table with ease. He sat opposite you, readying himself with his hands pressed together in prayer, thanking for the meal. Without another word, he dove in, while you stared at the meal on your plate suspiciously. You couldn't trust this kind of special treatment, for who knew what he had put on your plate?
Still don't trust me?
He spoke while you eyed him from across the table. His warm and loving smile still on his face, he walked over with his fork, taking a piece from your plate and consuming it himself. Nothing happened.
Now, come on, Poppet. I don't mind feeding you if that's what you want.
He continued with another mouthful on his fork. You stared at the morsel, succulent against the light while it hovered mere inches from your lips. Though you only ate moments ago, it was a small meal. Nothing large enough to constitute anything decent. The temptation was there, staring at you, while Midoriya's eyes watched you intently, still with fork in hand.
May I eat my own meal, please?
You requested.
Of course you can,
cooed Midoriya while he took your hands in his, giving you the fork in his fingers.
Shall we?
You eyed his movements while he returned to his side of the small table, continuing to enjoy his meal while you stared on yours. Unlike Midoriya, you had no knife. Your food had already been plated and cut into pieces, ready to be consumed without any effort. You figured this was precautionary, to keep any objects that could act as weapons away from you. Midoriya wasn't wrong to think otherwise. He was crafty, and knowing his analytical mind covered every aspect possible to prevent you from escaping, let alone harming him should you choose to. You continued to eat your meal, slowly indulging in its rich flavors that were leagues and bounds an improvement from the microwavable you've been surviving on. You wondered if he cooked the meal himself.
I've been thinking more about that feature wall idea, and thought maybe you would appreciate it in the bedroom.
Started Midoriya.
After all, with no windows, it would liven the room up.
I think I'm okay without it.
You spoke.
I don't need that.
How about a bigger bed?
I'm okay with what I have.
Silence fell for some time while you ate, realizing that Midoriya had halted his meal. He had grown eerily quiet, his eyes downcast while he stared at his half-eaten meal. It caught your attention, having consumed most of your plate while you eyed his reaction. The last thing you needed was another outburst from him, similar to a week ago when he forced you into the kitchen counter out of frustration from your defiance. His emerald eyes stared back into yours, pushing his chair from behind to walk back to you once more. He never released his gaze, staring into your eyes before he gripped your chin in his fingers, forcing your eyes to meet his. A twist of his hand revealed the bruise on your face, assessing the old wound while his thumb rubbed gently over its purple-ridden skin.
I'm sorry, Poppet.
He apologized in your ear.
I'll have to have a good word with Monoma about this, when he gets himself out of his predicament.
I'm fine.
You spoke until he forced you to turn to him again.
What is this about? I thought you'd be happy here. I've even made dinner just like I promised.
Well, that confirmed that he did make the meal.
You abducted me.
You started.
I did not consent to this. You took me.
Midoriya's fist slammed into the table, the sudden clang of plates attacking your ears when you flinched away from this outburst, waiting for another strike. But nothing came. You peeked up at Midoriya, who loomed over you, his fist still clenched on the table while his stare held on to you. He did not look impressed by your defiance. However, you spotted something shift in his mind, watching his eyes change its gleam and that grin return.
Yeah, I did.
He admitted.
Because I loved you.
Your eyes widened from the shock. His behavior was evident that first day when he was possessive, obsessive, and everywhere, all at once. But now, you noticed Midoriya looked focused, as if he was himself. The man you knew back at graduation. The man filled with hope for a future safe from the evils of the world.
I loved you then, and I love you now.
He continued, his gloved fingers gently trailing across your cheek.
Just trust in me, Poppet.
But...
Midoriya's lips crashed into yours, the warmth filling your senses while he hungered and lusted for your taste. You felt his passionate grasp on you, unable to breathe until he parted every so often before he continued his assault once more. Your hands struggled against the shackles of your bound chains, shaking from his fervent want and need for you, until you felt the cold stainless steel of the fork on the table, gripping onto it. Your fingers released the fork upon Midoriya's crushing grip on your shackles, pinning your hand to the table while he still indulged in his kiss. You mumbled and groaned in protest. Yet that only surged Midoriya's passionate advances further, his kiss hungrily deep until he pulled away from you violently. A gasp of air relieved you from the assault. Your hand still pinned while Midoriya stared into your eyes, his warm smile present.
I hope you enjoyed dinner here,
he whispered, his nose grazing close to yours.
I promise I won't be so forthcoming next time. The past got the better of me.
You couldn't justify where Midoriya was mentally at this point, but you couldn't pass the opportunity to learn more. Perhaps allowing him to talk about his perspective would yield more information, or, if you were lucky, more about his operations. He looked as if his guard was lowered.
There's something I've been meaning to ask you, actually.
You motioned, watching the curious quirk in Midoriya's brow.
How did you find me?
You mean past all the encryptions, whispers, and the dead air around your entire existence?
Questioned Midoriya.
Well, it wasn't easy. I knew someone was on my case, but never thought it would be you until, let's say, a good Samaritan tipped me off. I mean, I haven't heard from you in years, and then suddenly, you're on my radar. Still safe and sound.
And you're not going to let me in on your little secret, huh?
Secret?
I know about your doll houses, but what about the vandalism, the tauntings, the robberies?
Those are just for fun. Besides, someone has to do something, right? Outside of Kirishima and Kaminari, I at least meticulously pick reasons why such things happen. And for good reason, too.
You expected nothing less. Midoriya's choices looked random to anyone outside of knowing him, but everything he did followed a pattern or purpose. Your kidnapping to everyone else could have been just as he described, but you knew there was more to his organized chaos.
And your upstanding citizen?
Oh, that's a secret I'll never tell.
He teased while his fingers trailed along your jaw.
He made a deal with me that I couldn't refuse. My puppet for his privacy.
Midoriya's lips trailed along yours before he held onto your cheek, pushing his into yours while his lips soon caressed your neck. He was still, at least for a moment, absorbed in his embrace and not wanting to release you, not wanting to let go of the one thing he treasured most out of his entire collection in his neighborhood. Meanwhile, your mind reeled from the little information you gathered. You were in Midoriya's clutches because of the snitch. Deducing the snitch was impossible at this point. It would require raking through every person you knew who was close to this case, and suspecting anyone from your agency was already a painful thought. You felt Midoriya's breath linger across your neck before he pressed his lips into it, succumbing to your touch and yours to his. This was the only way for you to discover more about his motives, as hurtful as it may be. Bend to his whim, and perhaps he may bend to yours. Little did you know that outside of the greenhouse that sat atop one of many of Midoriya's apartment complexes was a man who watched through the glass panes, the view of the dinner table and the both of you in his sights. He frowned feeling the guilt well in his conscience upon seeing the scene unfold.
I'm sorry.
He whispered before he made his way from the rooftops of adjacent buildings, his cloak trailing behind him.